Hey there, welcome to episode 135 of the Caffe Genius Impresario's audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. I'm recording this at I think it's 12:01 p.m. afternoon Pacific time here in Vegas on Friday, September 26, 2025. We publish this audio program every Friday, so pretty good timing there. Today's title and topic. It's been a while. We are going to talk about me, myself, and Caffe Genius. I am the interviewer, the interviewee, if this were an interview episode, which I guess it kind of is. No, it's just another monologue, but the subject among my favorites. Subjects. Season 2, 135. We're coming up on soon season 3. Anyway, if you're not familiar with the Caffe Genius organization, it's really just a sort of a project, but if you're not familiar with Caffe Genius in general or the Caffe Genius Impresario's audio program, stay tuned. This whole episode will include details about that and those. The Impresario's audio program talks about the subject matter revolves around the Entrepreneurial Innovation Ecosystem of the Greater Vegas area. That's Las Vegas, Nevada. Really more like Clark County. Clark County and its population of about 2.3 million people. Interesting place. Not sure what it's going to be. It's not sure what it's going to be, but we'll find out eventually. Caffe Genius itself, I am going to give a brief history, but the name comes from two things. Cafe Centro, which was a coffee shop in San Francisco, the place where startups start, as they used to describe themselves. It was located in South Park, very near the baseball park, kind of across the street. It was an actual park, though, with grass, trees, park benches. A very pleasant little spot, by the way. It's too bad the Cafe Centro. Did I say Genius? Cafe Centro is no more. It unfortunately didn't really survive the pandemic. It survived for some time, but ultimately succumbed. It was spelled with two Fs. Had two Fs, as does Caffe Genius. So an homage of sorts to that one. And I think it may have started when it was Pac Bell Park. It was certainly AT&T Park when I hung out at Cafe Centro several times. Now it's Oracle Ballpark, something. So Oracle really is taking over the world. The genius part comes from the genius lunches that we used to have among some various characters. Some were directly a part of the Downtown Project startup cohort. Others, like myself, were sort of spectators, but it was an ad hoc, casual gathering of people too busy to spend a Saturday every month milling around conducting transactional conversations. This was a quick lunch, a little gossip, see who's doing what's going on, news of the month, news of the week, whenever. They were occasional. I wouldn't say they were regular, just whenever. I used to travel quite a bit around that time, so if I was in town, I was sure to attend. So Caffe Genius. Impresarios are people that make things happen, spelled with two S's. Caffe Genius Impresarios. And so the audio program that talks, not necessarily including them in an interview format or similar, but certainly about people who get things done and the environment in which they attempt to do so. Caffe Genius Impresarios, the Caffe Genius project. We will talk about that today. Hopefully wherever you found this audio program, which hopefully is in more places, and hopefully there will be yet more. There is an episode description. Hopefully you found that. And within the show notes, including a two-sentence summary. No, I think it's one long sentence. You think I write it. I should remember. A summary that I'll read, and then the links for today's episode. There are only two, and they are this. I've cut it down a bit. There's a link to the Caffe Genius homepage, which is Spartan at best, but I'm inching towards actually having something of a presentable design for all of the websites having to do with my various audio programs. And the usual shameless self-promotion link to the profile page linking everything, but we'll get to that in a moment. So without further ado, the summary of today's episode. Every once in a while, I remember that I, too, am an entrepreneurial innovator in our Entrepreneurial Innovation Ecosystem here in Greater Vegas, and who better a guest to have at the end of September than yours truly. Hey, that's me. The links, as I suggested, the Caffe Genius homepage, Caffe Genius, CAFFEGENIUS, no punctuation, caffegenius.org. It's not a business or a company, it's a project. I'll describe that again, as I've said. So caffegenius.org, it is part of the Dan Hugo empire. And the profile page linking everything for your host, that's me, buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. There you will find a freeform profile page with links to all of my audio programs. They have home pages, they have Spotify for creators profile pages, there are YouTube channels. Maybe there's more coming, who knows? But that's a quick rundown on that page, not only of a little mini personal bio, the links to various audio programs. There are links to various GitHub repositories regarding projects on which I work. There are some affiliate links if you'd like to obtain some of my preferred coffee beans from Amazon, and some affiliate links for some other things that I actually use. No additional cost to you, but if you'd like to support all of these various efforts in some small way, you're under no obligation to actually spend any money. You don't have to contribute anything to buying me a coffee, although if you do, the funds and proceeds that come in through that buymeacoffee.com platform do indeed go toward coffee, whether it's beans or coffee devices for the preparation of. So we'll see how that works. And I've had that page for probably, I should find out when I actually created the page, but I think it's 5 years. I think it was during the pandemic, or either during or slightly after. So we'll say 5 years. It's been around. I've had the danhugo.com domain for much longer, and so some of the content from Buy Me a Coffee will be mirrored onto my own personal site. But the whole idea of having a site that's managed by someone else, but that it's fairly minimalist, is that I don't have to maintain my own website in times of chaos and distraction. And so the buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo page has been there the whole time. And I'm not linking to it, but you can find it there. The Buy Me an Update audio program is published on Mondays. It used to be exclusively on Buy Me a Coffee, hence the name, but now it too is available in all the places. So all of these are linked from that profile page, so check it out. And now on with the show. A little backgrounder, as I mentioned. For those completely new to this, I am an engineer. So this is a me backgrounder, the me and myself part. I'm an engineer by academic training and career experience, graduated from Harvey Mudd College. It's located in Southern California, in Claremont, California. If you've heard of Pomona College, many people have. Claremont McKenna comes up every once in a while. Scripps, but I think Pomona is probably the best known. Pitzer, Harvey Mudd College, part of the 5 colleges. Claremont, 5 Claremont colleges, something like that. 5 colleges. Harvey Mudd, Claremont McKenna, Scripps, Pitzer, Pomona. Yeah, that's 5. And there's a Claremont Graduate School, but that's something else. Anyway, I did 2 tours in Silicon Valley and arrived in Las Vegas in August of 2013 after a house fire in Sunnyvale, California. Boy, that was good times. Let me tell you, I've told that story already. Strangely, I worked for Intel Corporation. By the way, you're always welcome to listen to any of the previous 135 episodes. There was an episode 0, so this is episode 135, but this makes it the 136th episode. I'll let you work on that later. Strangely, I worked for Intel Corporation after I moved from Silicon Valley to Vegas. The only Intel employee in Nevada for that interval, the time that I was working for them. No, I can't say that. By the time I left Intel during one of their big layoffs, there were 2 other people officially residing in the state of Nevada, in addition to myself. Where one of them was the producer of the CEO's part of any presentations, like CES. And then there was one other person. Anyway, I was a software architect and a technical liaison in the Maker Innovator group, traveling around all of the time to hackathons, maker fairs, and Intel lab sites, as in places where devices were created in a lab. So I was working on products and also heading out into the field to work with people who were using those products. So Intel lab sites to work on our products in that space. So the Galileo was already done as I joined the Gen 1 board. The Gen 2 came out after. I did some work on that. So Galileo, Edison, the Arduino 101, that was based on the Curie embedded part. And then the Joule, I think, was dead before. It was dying when I was laid off, and I think it was dead soon after. The Maker Innovator Group. It was a good idea, just no sales. Fun fact, they sold individual units at million unit pricing. So Intel salespeople had no interest in playing that game. So we mostly just gave away products at Hackathon. Before that, I had various experiences in the startup and big company areas actually in Silicon Valley. So when I moved to Vegas, I had an opportunity to work for Intel in Vegas. And even though my group was in somewhere in San Diego, somewhere in the Bay Area, in Santa Clara, and somewhere in Oregon, and then somewhere in other parts of the world where I would go visit them. So it was a pretty good deal. I got a lot of experience in the modern era working with very innovative people, which you would think would be useful here. And it kind of is, but only you and I appreciate that, I think. I arrived initially in Silicon Valley in 1993, just as things began to get interesting in the so-called dot-com era. Though as some are aware, this was by no means commencement of the Silicon Valley adventure, which started about 100 years earlier. Some people think Silicon Valley just sprang up out of nowhere in 2008 even. Oh, were there giants on whose shoulders we're standing? It was an interesting time, though. And when I first moved to Las Vegas, as the downtown project was beginning to bloom, I was interested. This was in 2013, August. I was interested in seeing where that might lead. It was not quite what I expected. Though, to be honest, I wasn't quite sure what to expect in general. On reflection, though, I think a lot of the way the downtown project unfolded is both predictable and worthy of examination, which is where the retrospective project comes in. We'll talk about that shortly. So what is Caffe Genius? In January of 2022, as the world was settling back into some sort of almost normal, I had a bootstrappers breakfast meeting. I was the local chapter host. I think I did it for 2.5 years. 2 years, about 2 years. I don't know, something like that. Ultimately questionable. I had a bootstrappers breakfast meeting downtown and suggested, based on the Level Up, I think it was, meetup that I had attended in November. It was a Startup Vegas event, Startup.Vegas, that people needed to practice pitching their startup ideas. The startup presentations were supposed to be like 10 minutes, and they went on for like 35 minutes. People were falling asleep. The panelists asking questions didn't remember the beginning of the presentation. They were probably dozing off. So it was kind of a train wreck, to be honest. The pitch workout room was born to commence at Tech Alley some 2 weeks later, based on the founder, chief janitor of Tech Alley, Josh Levitt, sitting there at the table for that breakfast. So we said, hey, let's do it. Why not? Let's try it. So we did it at 9 o'clock in the morning before the normal program started. And we actually had a room full of people, and 6 people presented, including Josh, where he presented his what would become Intagly. So that set the tone. I think it was 12 days. I don't know, 11 days, something. It wasn't really 2 weeks. And I figured it would be helpful to wrap the notion in a name, since I had other ideas as well. So including Pitch Mingle, which was harder than I thought it would be to actually get going. But Pitch Workout Room was pretty successful. I think we had 19 consecutive months of Pitch Workout Room. I think it was generally successful. I think once a month, roughly, there was at least one presenter that would continue on with whatever they were presenting about. So the Pitch Workout Room was for people who may not even have had a slide deck or an idea fully fleshed out. So usually there would be some sort of positive outcome at least once each month, which was, I think, a pretty good record considering it was essentially an open mic. So good times. In the larger sense, Caffe Genius was to be, and still is, though it has not really come along as much as I would have liked so far, an initiative focused on the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem of the greater Vegas area to understand what works and what does not from the ground level, speaking with and learning from fellow entrepreneurs in a variety of areas. For better or worse, entrepreneur and startup have been steered into tech too much here in Vegas, in a place with plenty of entrepreneurs and many startups of all ilks, but I'm not a coder is somehow a velvet rope situation. It shouldn't be. Entrepreneurs can take many forms, and they do. This was the plan for the first Genius Roundtable. We had the first cohort a couple of years ago now, which was off to a great start. I think it was in January of 23. Yeah, I think it was January of 2023. We kicked off the Genius Roundtable. It was a cohort of actual entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, it was too many solo entrepreneurs, so there wasn't a really good sense of like really conducting a business in Vegas, but that's the lesson we can learn. It was off to a great start and then came in for an early and rough landing. I would dub it a failure overall. Again, learning lessons come from failure, so that's not a bad thing, but it wasn't what I was hoping it would be. A second cohort, a second attempt, is one where I would like to structure it in a communities of practice scheme, but as we'll probably discuss more as this episode progresses, participation is not easy to come by here in Vegas. I don't think I harp on this too much until the end. A little bit for Innovate for Vegas Foundation. One of the deeper dives that remains on deck, but which has not progressed so much as part of what I called Initiative 2025. Where did I get that from? It's a downtown project retrospective to see what we can learn from anyone who might participate in a look back, I said that weirdly, in a look back at what worked and what did not at that time, in their opinions, hopefully, regarding the downtown project, and a similar rolling introspection of the current entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem from people in it, or entering, or maybe departing it. This audio program should really include more conversations with members of this ecosystem, and it may well do just that at some time. We used to have guests back in the early days. In the meantime, this is not necessarily a healthy and thriving ecosystem, in my opinion, and Project 2025 is not helping, nor are the various other antics going on of late, but we don't need to get into that here. So Initiative 2025 was a play on Project 2025. Initiative 2025 would be far more constructive for the Southern Nevada, Greater Vegas area. Maybe Initiative 2026 will be. So addressing problem. The reason the Genius Roundtable is a good and even necessary idea is the trend we can see in Greater Vegas with regard to the desire to introduce the economic diversity dreams of around 2018, and certainly redoubled of late. And so they were certainly amplified during pandemic lockdowns with empty streets on the Strip. Hey, that's some plumbing going on. I think that gets picked up, so hopefully only distracting to me. So the economic diversity dreams that certainly got redoubled during the pandemic lockdowns with the empty Strip and so on. It's still a topic of discussion during what has been called the slow summer. And this is September. We're coming up at the end of September now, so we'll see how things are shaking out into the end of the year, where decisions are made with very little real information and, in my opinion, with what are probably misaligned KPIs. Those are key performance indicators. And this is how even good intentions can go awry. Honestly, I'm not sure how good these are, but either way, the intentions, the people who are actually adding to the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem should be listened to, not told. I could go on and on about this. In fact, I have 135 episodes, which means there should be a path connecting their views and how they change over time to the people making bad decisions so that they may be less bad. Wouldn't that be cool? I have produced entire episodes of this audio program on this topic from various angles, that the culture of innovation is in serious need of cultivation in the Greater Vegas area. And to be honest, I am reminded of this every time I hear that this is the next Silicon Valley, that we are a global innovation hub, and so on. It is simply not possible, or let us say profoundly unlikely, to convert an ecosystem successfully from fun economy to the next Silicon Valley by posting about it on LinkedIn and then, I guess it's done. Our work is done here. And certainly there is more to it than sprinkling money on top. It doesn't work that way. I won't go into broken record mode here. Start with episode 85 of this very audio program, wherever you found it. If you're curious, flip through the Impresario's episode catalog beyond that, and we'll talk. Episode 85 was about how Silicon Valley formed. Here's a fun fact, a little teaser. the gold rush of 1849 brought a lot of people to California. Leland Stanford made money selling picks and shovels to the miners. That's there's a trope in there. The best way to make money from a gold rush is selling picks and shovels. And so he took his money and invested it in the area, naming a little university after his child, who I believe died at age 15 of a malady. I don't remember if it was tuberculosis, but so his 15-year-old son, if you read the fine print, it's Stanford is named for the son, the Stanford son. So Stanford got its start based on the gold rush, and Silicon Valley culture got its start in those times. It was focused on telegraphs and vacuum tubes, radio communications. There's a lot going on before even World War II starts, where Dr. Frederick Terman, sometimes called the father of Silicon Valley, would return from his radar work from the war to become the dean of engineering at Stanford. And the story really starts getting going at that point. So yeah, you don't just sprinkle money on top of a place and then 6 months later, you're the next Silicon Valley. End of the day, and I've been saying this since I first heard someone say that we're going to be the next Silicon Valley, we should instead aim for being a better Vegas, a greater Vegas, in fact, since I am a strong believer that entrepreneurs should not wait for others to do things like solving their problems. Like entrepreneurs should say, I have a problem. When is someone else going to solve it? That's not an entrepreneur. I am putting myself where my opinions are to pursue better understanding and perhaps some elevation and cultivation of the ecosystem, or at least the culture within it. I think ecosystems kind of emerge. They take a very long time to change. So we'll see. So now let's talk about what that means. The Innovate for Vegas Foundation. So Code for Vegas was a part of Code for America just before I got to town back in 2013, and wound down while I was traveling around for Intel. Thus, I never really got a look at the way it was at that point. Thus, two people, myself and one other, had simultaneous notions to reboot Code for Vegas in 2022, as it turns out. And so we pushed forward without any, no looking back for us. The two of us had a conversation or two around December of 2021, figured out how we were going to move forward. And in January 22, we were getting the ball rolling, starting to talk to Code for America, trying to figure out what their problem was. They had many. And determining that maybe going as an independent organization would make more sense. The other person accepted a job offer in there on the other side of the country. So he moved on and moved before we got anything really started. And our early team was not a great fit, as it turns out. So growing pains were painful early and solved soon. So that's probably better that they were sooner rather than later. I learned along the way that Code for Vegas had a core team of about 4 people. That was the original one, with 10 times that number signed up at the meetup.com group, which was how Code for Vegas organized the local brigades. These were local volunteer organizations at the city or community level. And by the way, I tried to get that group. Hey, can we get the meetup group since you guys aren't maintaining it anymore? And they said, nope. So I couldn't even get the list of people. Anyway, that was good times. Basically, we knew up front that we had our work cut out for us. So we made an attempt to attract participation at Tech Alley each month. But the culture of innovation is in need of some serious cultivation, as I mentioned. And we did not encounter reasonably large groups of people motivated enough to form a functional cohort, despite various efforts. So people would show up, and then, I'm not kidding, oh, we have to do stuff? Now, as it turns out, Code for America exited the business of enabling the brigade system. So all around the country, brigades still active, but maybe looking for more participation, were faced with something of a rug pull. We never rejoined as we had intended to, and we renamed. So we formed our own independent 501c3, so we were not beholden to them for anything. And we had renamed our organization to avoid dealing with their frivolity, their cease and desist notions, which were not uniformly enforced, and they were going through their own sinking ship issues. So more importantly, we also wanted to align with the Innovate Vegas branding. We are a global innovation hub, by the way, go ahead and ask anyone. They'll look at you funny. And to be clear to others, to everyone, that we were pursuing more than just code. Code for Vegas would prompt so what if I'm not a coder question more than once. At this point, my approach is to pursue what are essentially big swings as solo initiatives, reach out to collaborate with people regardless of their location. They may be in former brigades all around the country, or maybe not even within this country, and see what happens as we have entered our 4th fiscal year already. Oh, time flies no matter what. Fingers crossed. And I do an entire weekly audio program called Let's Innovate for Vegas. If you want to know more, you can visit innovateforvegas.org, or there are links to everything on that profile page, linking everything that I mentioned in the link section. Food trucks. This is always something I want to talk about. Some of you may know this. We had a Mobile Vendor Owners Association for a time here in Vegas, the Nevada Mobile Vendors Association, which we intended to form so that vendors around the state could participate. So it wasn't the Las Vegas Mobile Vendors Association. Not just food trucks. That has been done. In fact, we did it with the Bay Area Mobile Food Vendors Association when I lived there. While for many food trucks or taco trucks or loncheros or merely for many, let me restate the emphasis there. For many, food trucks or taco trucks or loncheros are merely a vehicle from which to purchase lunch. In fact, it is quite a business with a lot of moving parts, literally. And it turns out brick and mortar restaurants kind of hate them. Unfair advantage. Yeah, I think I've actually gone into this a bit. It's an easy argument to swat down, but it's one that persists. Silicon Valley and food trucks went together really well at the time. There were so many small startups and small businesses and all sorts of, I think they're called tilt up, the business parks, office parks. Here in Vegas, the culture is different, partially because of that restaurant dislike, but also a lack of understanding on the part of the health department. Hopefully this has changed 5 years later, but they were really quite protectionist. They were very open about the fact that it's unfair that a food truck should not have to pay more to take business away from brick and mortar restaurants. So for the restaurants hating the food trucks, so did the health department. So that's always good. Not everybody, but the people who were in charge. This is not uncommon in other health departments, but they did not hide it, which was strange. There used to be a lot of legal action going on as food trucks were becoming more popular. And there's the Institute for Justice in Arlington, Virginia, would take on lawsuits they're very libertarian, on behalf of mobile vendors and so on. They did a lot of work in Chicago and some other places to try to be more fair. Often ice cream truck rules would be used on food trucks, which is a completely different business, and so on and so on and so on. So very interesting, actually. So part of the concept of our owners association was to make a case for leveling that playing field. There were some other things, but to be honest, the pandemic kind of squashed the notion early. So we were just kind of getting into a position where we could actually start to do things as the pandemic was hitting. And food truck owners here are not nearly so interested in being early adopters or in early adoption. So this is too bad. They're very, very, very focused on their own business. Oh, we can put it that way and leave it there. I will add, though, that back in Silicon Valley, I had developed a completely flipped platform for mobile vendor, customer, and venue connection. But then that fire came along. So I worked on 7 food trucks. I talked to actual developers of these various tools that people are using, like Roaming Hunger and so on. People are scraping Twitter, getting it wrong, all kinds of stuff. So I said, we could do it differently. And by having an owners association to work with, that was like not a captive audience, but it was an attentive audience to try out some ideas. So I used to develop my prototypes, go to food truck events, everybody, hey, Dan, how's it going? And then say, what would you think of this? Is this usable? Yeah, this is awesome. That's great. When can we give you our money? It's always nice to hear. But then the fire, and I moved to Vegas. There's always been something of an albatross around my neck that I didn't actually launch this and see if it would work. And that is often my motivation. I have an idea. I want to see if it will work. So it is not actually a dead idea. Ideally, it will make an appearance in the mix, especially within MuniBits, which is the next topic. One of the initiatives we have at the foundation is My Muni, coupled with the Welcome initiative. They're both basically the same coin, two different sides. Same poker chip. Basically an open source information sharing platform intended for city scale. There's more to it than that. And in fact, this week's episode of Let's Innovate for Vegas was all about federation, and these two initiatives were a part of that. Munibits itself has to be an open platform for city scale information sharing using modern and old school tools and methods, with more to that, of course. Maybe. So Munibits is basically the product, if you like, from the MyMuni and Welcome initiatives. So Munibits would probably take the form of something from a business standpoint similar to WordPress. So open source, use it if you like, build some commercial services around it. So once Munibits can be minimally useful, and I don't mean an MVP, I've never really liked that label. I think it sets up a bad sort of set of expectations. I will begin a slow rollout, which while also integrating with some of the existing tools that are out there. Again, the last episode of Let's Innovate for Vegas about federation went into some of this. The Vegas population and the Vegas visitors are my target audience. That's the two sides of the poker chip. And at the same time, I'm hoping to attract participation from others interested in deploying something like this in their localities. Remember those former brigades that now maybe paused? A long shot, but knowing what I have learned the hard way about the chicken and egg in this context, I need to make both the chicken and the egg and see if anybody wants breakfast. So that is the way. That is the way forward. Before you ask, I will say that the part of the long tail model of our civic volunteer organization, the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, is to deploy civic volunteer initiatives as commercializable sort of mini startups, arm's length businesses that can showcase the efforts of the civic volunteers with first refusal to the people who made it happen. So in other words, you get to be part of a nonprofit startup for free. And then as we launch things, and that's where our co-creation model, but our whole team initiative. So you're part of the entire process. You're not being told what to do. There is no management, so to speak. So everybody's part of getting it up and running, and then we try to commercialize it. So it is something of a life and job skills, life skills and job skills workshop at the same time. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. At the moment, it's just me, so I automatically like the idea. And by the way, the food truck stuff that I mentioned, my platform would fit into this. That's a longer story. It'll make more sense when I can demo it. I've really learned, especially here in Vegas, nobody really wants to hear what you're working on. They want you to show them what you've finished. That's the pitch to make to people is, would you like to participate in our foundation? Here is what you are already missing out on. I don't know if that's healthy. That is not the mark of an innovation hub. That is a mark of an unimpressed. Show me something. Show me what you got. Let me decide if I want to support this effort. When I was still new here in the greater Vegas area, this is my sentiment research collaboratory effort, which is lower down on the hierarchy of, or priority list, not hierarchy. So when I first moved to the greater Vegas area, getting to know the downtown project cohort and a ton of other people outside of the downtown project purview, I started to see something of a disconnect between what the DTP, the downtown project, was aiming for and how the rest of Vegas seemed to flow, especially with regard to tourism. Today, I would say it is a disconnect between the fun economy and the so-called startup scene. But back then, all I knew was there was a need to connect downtown and all of this effort going on with the Strip, which is where the people were. And to his credit, Tony Hsieh actually did something in this direction. Tony Hsieh and others, it wasn't just one person doing all this. During CES, they actually sponsored a small school bus, I guess, a little tiny school bus that would bring people from the convention center to downtown, and they promoted they had like a passport book with stamps, and you would wander around downtown and visit the container park and get a demo, some sort of tech talks or whatever from Tech Cocktail running, so you could see some of the startups and what they were doing. So I think that was a noteworthy effort, and it didn't really inform my notion, but it was certainly an aha, like, So what I was talking about was actual engagement, not just show and tell, sort of. I had a conversation with someone at LVGEA, and I do know who it was, and we are still connected on LinkedIn for what that's worth. which probably should have been the LVCVA. So the LVGEA is the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance. They do more economic planning, advising. They are really drawn to big companies moving to Vegas. So far, I mean, they've just changed their leadership, so we'll see if there's any new directions. This has been over the 12 years that I've been here, so things have changed significantly. But I probably should have talked to the LVCVA, the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, which does things closer to the ground. They will use the word responsible for Formula One and some other things. So yeah, the wonderful and well-received welcome campaign to try to bring tourism back. I think they drove the 5 days of discounts, which nobody knew about until, today starts the 5 days of discounts. Maybe I should not have talked to them, which I never did. But lessons learned, LVGA, well, I got a really positive response. That's a great idea. And then nothing else ever happened. Yep. You pretty much have to do it yourself here. There is very little in the way of, hey, how can I be a part of this early stage thing? Unless you have money falling out of your pockets, I guess. I have told this story a few times. When I was in high school, my English teacher, Terry Fields, told us a story of her early career before she started teaching, where her publisher of her first book, it was a teenage romance novel. And to be clear, it was aimed at teenagers. That was the target demographic. I think we need to be clear about that nowadays. Yeah, I'll leave that there. She needed a demographic survey. Her publisher wanted her to somehow be responsible for conducting this survey for whatever reason. To this day, and I've never really asked her, I could reach out to her. She's still around in the Phoenix area. What was that? But anyway, as she told it, they had no money for such things. She and her partner, I assume it was eventually, they were either married or got married eventually. This was all a bit odd, but then they had an idea. As she tells it, they headed from Phoenix to Anaheim, and they interviewed countless teenagers in her target demographic, the intended audience of her first book and many after, as they waited online with their parents to ride the rides at Disneyland. Problem solved for the cost of travel and some tickets to enter their park. So let the people come to you or to Disneyland or to Vegas and engage them as part of that experience. Sounds like an interesting idea, doesn't it? So if I merge the ideas, we connect the entire notion of entrepreneurial innovation in the greater Vegas area with the fun economy by connecting new products and services with people from all over so they can give them a try and provide some feedback. I actually witnessed this firsthand, a teeny tiny scale, on Fremont when a former colleague in from Europe with a booth set up with some other, I don't think they were the only company. I think it was like 2, 3, 4, something. And I don't even know who did this. They set up a little booth thing near the D in the middle of Fremont there in the big circular area. And they asked passersby to try out mock-ups of their product. They were to be noise canceling headphones, but they were just the mock-ups. So they were non-functional prototypes. And then they would respond to a survey about form and fit, not function. I have talked about our city as a showcase. I did an entire episode on that. So to connect the fun economy with innovation in general is the idea. So that is that. So that will be coming along soon. In fact, the MuniBits platform, and that's not the actual name I will deploy it under, but so when we get that going here in Vegas, City as a Showcase will be featured prominently in that. So I'm essentially building some of the tools to enable the building of the next level of tools. So doing all of this in Vegas, this is the last section, I promise. Vegas is a tricky place, as I've learned in my dozen years here. Some of my efforts are centered on trying to change that for the better, but generally speaking, it is not easy to do interesting things here. I'm not saying it's impossible, and I'm not saying nobody is doing interesting things here, because I am doing interesting things here, but it is not easy. I say this after spending some serious time in a real innovation hub that's sometimes known as Silicon Valley from 1993 to 2001 and 2005 to 2013. I took a break there in the middle, coincided with the events of 9/11, which I have described previously. And that was something of a challenge. I moved back to Phoenix. I was tired of Silicon Valley. Then I moved in August. I finished moving in August of 2001. So a brief respite, and then chaos and the job market tanked, and all my big plans definitely put us under. So it was something of a challenge, to say the least. I find it more challenging here to do anything interesting, believe it or not. It is Phoenix-like in the old Phoenix days. Phoenix has actually come a long way. I think it's still more aimed at larger companies, the Googles and the Apples and the so on. Semiconductors is still a big part of the economy there, but then so is genetics research. Genetics took 20 years to establish itself. Well, I mean, it established itself during the 20 years, but it didn't just happen overnight, as people expect will happen here with the introduction of, say, AI, which is that's going to be the next big thing. That's going to drive the innovation culture here in Vegas. No. So unless I'm working completely solo, which is the way it actually is, it's really difficult to find collaboration and anything, really. Participation is really hard to come by. In general, unless there's free food. You got to offer people free food, then they might wander over, and you're going to get the people interested in free food. Here's a fun fact I've learned. The people doing really interesting things are too busy to wander out just for free food. The reliance on LinkedIn for communication via headlines, not actual communication, more just broadcast, but at the same time revolving around a culture of ghosting, because replies are even harder to come by than collaboration and participation, or maybe only communicating with an in crowd, or certainly responding to people from whom you want something. So transactional conversations all the time. It boggles the mind. It appears, though, that the people making decisions here in the area are impressed by shiny objects. Maybe a new startup will get attention where someone with actual relevant experience and insight is treated as a troublemaker. Unless you are a celebrity or wealthy or both, in which case they will accept you as a troublemaker, as a change maker. It's something of a popularity contest, I've determined. I have gotten that sense over the years, and I'm tired of trying to argue against. So it's just the way it is. The halo effect is real. Unfortunately, as the famous commercial suggests, it is the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the people who are not fond of rules without respect for the status quo. You know the one. It's a pretty good commercial, something to think about. Anyway, I got to get back to work. Thanks for listening, as always. That's some me, myself, and Caffe Genius. So if I see you around town, strike up a conversation. I'll tell you more. In the meantime, pretty much solo, trying to make some big swings and see what comes of it. So that's it. Time to let my voice rest. The weather changes here are wreaking havoc with everything. On that note, thanks for listening again, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.